NFL Network's Jim Trotter is here at the TCO Performance Center. Vikings Camp joint practice day number 2 is wrapping up, about to wrap up here now, and you've had a chance to talk to a few people, feel the vibe, feel the energy here. What's been your initial impressions of this new look Vikings team?
Well, my first impression here is the facility. It's the first time I've been here, and it's incredible, man. I kind of laugh because I live in California, and I'm like, to try and build something like this in California, what it would cost for the land and whatnot, couldn't do it. So first off, props to the Vikings organization for having such a tremendous facility. In terms of the team, the vibe, man, when you have a guy like Kwesi and a guy like Kevin, there's a positive energy and flow. You know, when Zim was here, obviously Zim's an old Parcells guy, so he liked to keep a level of tension in the building, and particularly in the locker room. You don't feel that here. You feel guys who know they're going to be held accountable, but know they have to work, and there's this positive flow. So for me, that's what you feel. Now, obviously, once the games start, there's going to be adversity, but when you talk to Kevin, that's something that obviously he anticipates and knows he's going to have to deal with.
How important is that team bonding and what Kevin is doing with being intentional, of having all the guys around and everyone, learning things about each other for that adversity later on in the season?
Oh, it's critical. Guys always, people like to use war metaphors for football and whatnot. And so what you'll hear from guys is talk about, I want to know who's in the foxhole with me, that when things get tough. And so I think that's critical. Like, one of the things that Kevin does is, when he says, how are you, it's not just a passing thing. He really wants to know. And so he tries to get to know something about you personally in terms of your family, those sorts of things, your interest and whatnot. And it's not done overnight. It takes time. But the one thing that he has said to me, and the advice he has gotten from other coaches, whether it's a Josh McDaniels or a Kyle Shanahan or a Mike Pettin or Brian Schottenheimer, people that he has worked with and known and whatnot, is to be yourself, and you got to be authentic. So regardless of what transpires out here, I think what you're going to see is a guy who's not going to ride that roller coaster of emotion, who's going to try and not necessarily flatline it, but be consistent in his approach with the guys and the messaging that he's giving them.
Speaking of being yourself, after practice, during practice day number 1 yesterday, you and Kevin sitting on your butts yesterday, just like a couple of kids in preschool.
Yeah.
Like, that conversation had to be really good. Anything that stood out outside of, being yourself from that day?
That was really the biggest thing. What I wanted to talk to him about more than anything is kind of like, how does a person know when they're ready to be a head coach? Everyone may have aspirations of being a head coach, but how do you know when you're ready? Because the worst thing you can do is be rushed into that job and fail. And so we had a conversation about that, about how he knew when he was ready, those sorts of things. And then you also want to talk about philosophy in terms of culture building, in terms of team building. What is it that are your pillars, your core principles that you have to have in order for a team or an organization to be successful? And so for he and I kind of felt like, look, he's from San Diego, I live in San Diego. It was kind of like, you're out on the beach just kicking back, having a conversation. And what I walked away from that with, too, is how many head coaches in the NFL, with everyone around and all eyes are on you, are going to take, a half hour to sit out in the middle of a practice field on your butt, like you say, and just have a conversation. But that's Kevin being Kevin in terms of being authentic, not trying to put on an air for anyone or for the people who might be watching or viewing it. It's just, I was like, damn, my back's tight. Can we, let's sit for a minute? He's like, yeah, let's do it, and so we did.
I love that. You talked about the head coach. When is a head coach? When are you actually ready to be that head coach? For this Vikings team, when do you think this Vikings team will be ready to take that next step?
It's a great question, but there are so many variables involved with that. In terms of taking the next step, what's your health like? What's your opponent like in terms of the division, those sorts of things? How long does it take for players to get comfortable with the systems that you're installing to where they become second nature, all of that? Look, we know this. Winning early builds momentum, and so you hope that they can do that in terms of doing that. But the one thing I do know, and this is from guys who even interviewed for this job, is that they all believe that there is talent here to win, and that this is not some reclamation project that's going to take forever. So to be truthful with you, I don't know in terms of taking that next step, if we're talking about, say, playoffs and trying to win a championship, or if we're just talking about how long till they get their legs. I believe in Kwesi from what I know about him from everyone, even before he got this job, and what people told me about him in terms of his approach to being very curious and asking questions and not being afraid to challenge conventional wisdom and those sorts of things. And then the fact that he and Kevin have a relationship and there's a lot of synergy there, or even as Kevin said to me, when they have disagreements, the two of them are able to work through it, is critical. So it's a question I can't answer, but what I can say is that at least from the jump here, it appears that these are the right people for the right time.
I love that. Hopefully the right time is this year to win the NFC North and hopefully get to the playoffs. But, Jim, always a pleasure talking to you.
No, my pleasure, man. I'll tell you this real quick. I said to Kevin, what are the expectations for this team? And he started to give me the coach speak that, well, we don't have our full roster yet. We haven't played a game yet. It's only 1 week in the preseason, all of that. And with him, knowing him from the past, you can kind of call BS. And I said to him, Kevin, I said, now look, as an outsider, I'm going to say to you, my first thing is you're going to talk about the division. You got to win in the division, because you win the division, it's a guaranteed spot in the playoffs, the easiest road to what you want to do. And I go on a little bit more, and he starts laughing. He goes, man, you've been up in my office reading my board, So I think that's the focus here that he will have is, number one, you got to win your division. And so obviously a lot of focus will be on Green Bay, who has had so much success in recent years.
Well, we get him week 1 this year. And Jim, always a pleasure talking to you. That's NFL Network's Jim Trotter. My name is Gabe Henderson. We'll see you guys next time.